If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 31, Advice from Yukino and a New Goal to Aim Higher. Because of Haruto's game matches with Reina, what should have been a simple 1-hour manuscript review often got dragged out to 2 hours. More than once, they only left Yukino's apartment after wasting time battling it out on the console. And lately, Haruto could no longer crush her effortlessly with one hand. That sharp little gremlin had learned the controls, and the moment she got comfortable with the game's flow, her growth became absurd. If Haruto let his guard down for even a second, she would sniff out a crack and pin him briefly, forcing him to take it seriously. Still, she had not beaten him even once. Not yet. Haruto had nearly 10 years of arcade experience behind him, while she only got to touch the game on the handful of days she came to Yukino's place to submit manuscripts. The gap in experience was simply too wide. But even so, Reina said calmly, her hand tightening slightly, since the very first installment until now, my numbers have been completely crushed by Blue Spring Ride. Ratings, votes, support totals, everything. I have not even gotten a single chance to overtake it. She stayed clear-headed even when Yukino praised her. The more Yukino described her as impressive, the more impressive it made Haruto look, because he was the one pressing her down so relentlessly. Her voice sounded light and serene, but inside she felt awful. No one was good at everything. There were countless things she could never compete in. If it came to raising pigs, doing farm work, or managing crops, she could work her whole life and still not catch up to people who had grown up with that world in their hands. But she did not care about those fields. She had no emotional attachment to them. Losing there did not sting. Only this did. Novels. Because of the strict way she had been raised, she had not been allowed many hobbies. The only thing she truly loved was reading fiction, and occasionally watching anime when she could squeeze time out of her schedule. And because she loved it so much, she had finally gathered the courage to hide it from her family and submit her work, becoming a serialized author. Yet in the one industry she cared about most, the moment she debuted, she was met with the same opponent again and again. The same age. The same school. Haruto. They had submitted on the same day, been signed under the same editor, and ended up serialized in the same magazine. A perfectly fair competitive environment. And she had been losing ever since. Reina's gaze flickered toward Haruto. This was someone she would never have paid attention to at school. Just an ordinary student, the kind who blended into the crowd. And yet he was suppressing her in every category. Maybe this was what fate had arranged for her. A rival placed directly in front of her. A mountain she was meant to climb. A whetstone meant to sharpen her. Her desire to win had already mutated into something heavier. Something obsessive. She even dreamed of beating him, whether it was in game matches, or in the rankings. Haruto thought Reina was the real genius. Reina thought Haruto was the rival destiny had assigned her, the peak she had to surpass. As for Yukino, she only felt like she had stumbled onto two treasures. And even geniuses needed a professional editor to point them toward the right career path. Akira wanting these two to represent Crimson Maple literature in the Ascent of New Gods selection looked rash at first glance. But the more Yukino thought about it, the more she felt it made sense. Two young authors with this kind of potential should not be confined to one region. Their stage should be all of Japan. If they could truly take part in the Ascent of New Gods, and make an appearance in front of readers nationwide, it would be an enormous boost to their careers as authors. After your current series ends, Yukino said slowly, don't waste time. You should pour everything into planning your next work. You need to secure your popularity and even strengthen it. And you should aim for one thing. She looked between them. Get your next novel serialized in Crimson Maple. The Ascent of New Gods seed spots in their region were chosen based on a combination of factors. A rookie author's serialization results in major regional magazines, tankobon sales, and other overall performance metrics. Historically speaking, the rookies selected to compete in the Ascent of New Gods had all, within 2 years of debuting, earned serialization credits in top flagship publications like Crimson Maple or Blue Sky. It was simple logic. If a whole region only got 3 seed slots across 2 years, why would anyone choose you unless you had that level of potential? Sure, even those selected authors often ranked in the lower half of the magazine. Some even scraped the very bottom, because they were still inexperienced. But they were scraping the bottom of magazines that sold 700,000, 800,000, sometimes close to 900,000 copies per issue. In the eyes of most people in the industry, being the weakest in a top-tier magazine still carried more weight than being number one in a smaller one. Even if Haruto topped Fleeting Blossoms, many editors would still rank that achievement half a tier below, barely surviving in Crimson Maple. Because most of the series in Fleeting Blossoms were, bluntly, works that had failed to secure a slot in Crimson Maple. So even if you dominated Fleeting Blossoms, you were still just the tallest person in a shorter crowd. Hey! Haruto blinked. Why was Yukino suddenly talking about aiming for Crimson Maple with their next work? Of course having that goal was good, but the urgency in her tone felt unusual. Yukino was normally steady and measured. This sounded like she wanted them to achieve it fast. Reina also looked at Yukino, sensing how seriously she was taking it. Seeing the confusion in their eyes, Yukino explained, briefly but clearly, what the Ascent of New Gods actually was, a nationwide selection event for promising rookie light novel authors. A few minutes later, both Haruto and Reina nodded, still slightly dazed. So you understand now, Yukino said. Around the end of the year, the seed slots for each region will start being evaluated. Then early next spring, the Ascent of New Gods magazine will go on sale across Japan. But if you want even a chance at being selected for our regional seed slot, you need a work that earns real results in Crimson Maple. She leaned back and continued. And you can't assume serialization openings appear whenever you want them. Sometimes 2 or 3 slots open up in a short time. Other times, you might not see a single opening for months. That's why you need to prepare a new, high-quality manuscript in advance and wait. The moment a slot opens, you strike. Then she smiled, as if she had suddenly remembered something personal. Let's see which of you gets into Crimson Maple first. If either of you pulls it off, it'll make me look good too. I've been working here almost 2 years since graduating, and I still haven't cultivated a single author who landed a series in Crimson Maple. It's honestly been a regret of mine. She paused, as if she almost said something else, but swallowed it. When she noticed neither of them seemed to catch the slip in her wording, she relaxed. Her pale, cute face brightened, and she laughed. Anyway, whoever helps me achieve that goal first, I'll give you a reward. A reward? Haruto's eyes lit up immediately. What kind of reward? Well. Yukino brushed her hair behind her ear, her eyes smiling. A fun reward. She leaned forward a little, clearly enjoying herself. And listen, I'm saying this now, so you can't back out later. Even if you don't like it when the time comes, you're not allowed to refuse. Haruto said, suddenly uneasy. Reina had been quiet for a long time. The atmosphere started to feel faintly strange, and both Haruto and Yukino turned to look at her. Reina, meanwhile, was fully immersed in Yukino's words. A race. A contest. After their current novels ended, they would compete to see who earned a Crimson Maple serialization slot first. Victory. Defeat. Competition. Her chest tightened, and something hot surged up inside her. Right now, both novels are at their 5th installment, but Blue Spring Ride still crushed her Yesterday's Starlight. Would Yesterday's Starlight ever overtake it before ending? She did not know. But at least right now. She looked at Haruto, and her fighting spirit flared. Losses happened. That was normal. The pain of losing with Yesterday's Starlight was real, but facts were facts. Still. If Yesterday's Starlight could not surpass Blue Spring Ride even by the time it ended, then at the very least, in their next duel. Reina's heartbeat quickened. She would win from the beginning. And by beginning, she did not mean the first installment's rankings. She meant the moment their new manuscripts were submitted to Crimson Maple's editorial department. She meant that moment when the editors, after reviewing both works, would sign off decisively and unanimously, saying, Reina's new work was clearly better than Haruto's. They would praise her series with the kind of admiration she had always wanted to hear, and when they spoke about Haruto's manuscript, it would be reduced to a single sentence. Just imagining it made the corner of Reina's lips lift. A dazzling, beautiful smile surfaced, so vivid it almost seemed unreal. For a moment, both Haruto and Yukino froze. She smiled so nicely. No, that was not the point. The point was, why was she spacing out in the middle of a serious conversation, and why was she smiling to herself like she had just won the lottery? It did not match her ice-cold genius honor student reputation at all. Chapter 32, Rivals, Ambitions, and Thoughts of the Next Series. Reina. Reina. Reina Fujimoto. Yukino called her name 3 times, raising her voice more each time, before Reina finally snapped out of the fantasy world she had wandered into. She knew writers were all prone to daydreaming. Some of them could space out for an hour or two without even noticing. Still, someone as focused as Reina getting that deep into her own head was rare. "I'm sorry." Reina flushed, embarrassed for a split second, but her expression shifted quickly, and the quiet, frosty mask she wore at school slid back into place as if nothing had happened. Watching that transformation made Haruto's face turn a little strange. Since he had started spending time around her, the halo he once associated with Reina, the untouchable genius honor student aura, had basically shattered into pieces. And honestly, compared to her cool, distant image at school, these occasional clumsy, oddly cute moments made her feel more human. More adorable, even. "All right," Yukino said, her tone turning serious again. "I've explained everything clearly. Based on your chapter estimates, in about 2 weeks the publisher will have the complete manuscripts for Blue Spring Ride and Yesterday's Starlight." She looked at them both. "The end of these 2 series is only the beginning of your careers as light novel authors. Don't get arrogant, but don't get impatient either. That Ascent of New Gods event is just a goal the company threw out there. It's not something you absolutely have to achieve. But writing a truly excellent novel that can earn a slot in Crimson Maple is a step you must take if you want to stand as professionals." Her gaze sharpened. "So work hard. Both of you." Not long after, Haruto returned home and started turning over everything he had learned tonight. Ever since his serialization began, he had slowly started finding real enjoyment in this work. He was not the original creator of these stories, that much was true, but he was the first person in this world to ever encounter them through his own recollections and inspiration. And just by putting what he felt, the charm and brilliance of those works, into words and delivering them to Japan's otaku readers, Haruto could already feel an immense sense of satisfaction. On top of that, it paid. What Yukino said tonight tempted him badly. First, earning a serialization slot in Crimson Maple. Second, obtaining a seed spot for the Ascent of New Gods. Yukino stopped her ambitions there. In her eyes, as long as Haruto and Reina could secure seed spots and get their work serialized in a nationwide magazine, that alone would be a massive victory. As for how well they would rank, she was not asking for miracles. But the moment Haruto learned a competition like that existed, something in his chest stirred, a restless, nameless thrill. If he could get a seed spot, then at the very least, he should aim for a result that exceeded everyone's expectations. The problem was, Haruto had big dreams and an empty head. If he truly wanted to compete in the Ascent of New Gods, then over the next half a year he would need to produce at least 2 extremely high-quality works. One of them would have to open the door to Crimson Maple, and do well enough there to strengthen his resume as a serialized author and help him secure the seed slot. The second would be the novel he would serialize in the Ascent of New Gods itself after winning that spot, and it would need to be good enough to capture the hearts of light novel fans nationwide. Otherwise he could forget about ranking high. But his dream method was unreliable. Now, though, he was not under pressure at all. Haruto let out a sigh. Thanks to Blue Spring Ride exploding in popularity, his pay had risen steadily per installment. He could roughly estimate that by the time the remaining chapters were finished, his total manuscript payments would be substantial. And with the tankobon releasing at the end of the month, the royalties would almost certainly surpass the serialization pay. His financial pressure was gone. As for academics, there was nothing to talk about. He was a hopeless slacker. What academic pressure could he possibly feel? If anyone was stressed, it was his homeroom teacher, who probably lay awake at night wondering how a class this hopeless would affect their year-end bonus. Even the serialization pressure was fading, because the remaining manuscript for Blue Spring Ride would be done soon. Right now, he genuinely wanted something new to appear in his mind. Anything at all. Another great work. Another story worth bringing into this world. Something that could help him push toward Crimson Maple. But reality was cruel. That convenient fall asleep and suddenly get memories of famous works situation was the definition of unreliable. It happened when it wanted to, and never when he needed it most. Life can't be smooth forever, he muttered in the dark. Maybe one day I'll run into something that really annoys me, and stress will spike. Then that very night I'll get lucky. Humans were like that. Always dramatic. Deep into the night, in a bedroom across town, Reina could not sleep. The full plot outline for Yesterday's Starlight was already complete. All that remained was turning it into polished text. The reason she could not rest was because she was thinking about her next project. She did not care much about the ascent of new gods itself. But if Haruto's work could be selected, then she absolutely could not fall behind. Her next work had to crush his arrogance in one decisive blow. Under the blanket, the girl pumped herself up again and again, gathering courage like she was preparing for war. Time passed. Another week went by, and Blue Spring Ride released its next installments. The plot unfolded almost exactly the way readers had feared. Yuri really did fall for Kao, all because of that gentle moment when he helped her during the incident on the class outing. And once that happened, the story pushed forward without mercy. During everyday conversations at school, Yuri kept probing for information about Kao. She kept testing the waters, and in the end she confessed her feelings, pouring her heart out to Futaba, her best friend, as if this was something safe to share. And Futaba, hearing it all, was shoved into the worst possible corner. Her love for Kao. Her friendship with Yuri. A choice that felt impossible. The overall plot was simple, really. If you looked at romance novels from a distance, most of them were simple. The difference between bland and unforgettable was always the same thing. Characters. Details. In these chapters, Futaba's painfully twisted personality, her inability to choose cleanly between love and friendship, was rendered through gentle, delicate prose. Bit by bit, it seeped into the readers' hearts. The emotional knot that should have existed only inside the heroine was now sitting inside the audience too. Debate among fans grew hotter and hotter, and naturally, the vote counts rose with it. When the next installment released, Blue Spring Ride went head-to-head with The Day We Said Goodbye for the top vote rank and lost narrowly. But when the following issue hit stores, the long-reigning king of Fleeting Blossoms, the series that had held first place in popularity votes for many issues, finally lost its crown. It fell to second. Blue Spring Ride hit the top in both votes and ratings. First in both categories. A clean, undeniable takeover. Most of the editors had predicted it, and none of them were surprised. Even the author of The Day We Said Goodbye recovered quickly after hearing her long reign had ended. There was, however, a piece of gossip circulating inside Crimson Maple Literature's editorial department. Apparently, the thing that bothered that author most was not losing first place. It was the rumor that the author of Blue Spring Ride might be a guy. So she was losing at writing a shoujo romance to a male author now? That possibility apparently scrambled her brain. On the official Fleeting Blossoms forum hosted by Crimson Maple Literature, the staff even made a celebratory post. As for the fans, it's finally first. This calls for a festival. Blue Spring Ride is number one in both categories at last. It took several installments to fully reach the top. That wasn't easy. The fanbase needed time to pull people over from other series. That's just how it is. But honestly, I'm more excited for what happens next than I am about the rankings. I have a bad feeling, the story might get kind of painful. Relax. Shiori-sensei won't do anything stupid. Probably. But she's still just a high schooler. I'm scared the plot might collapse. Still, all we can do is support it. Both Shiori and Eri are students at Minamijo 3rd High, right? Maybe they're even best friends in real life. If that's true, there's no way she'd write some horrible best friends tearing each other apart storyline. Kao belongs with Futaba. No one gets to steal him, not even Yuri. No saintly heroine nonsense. If Futaba even thinks about giving Kao up to Yuri for friendship, I'll drop the series immediately. Same. Yet. Same. Chapter 33, the 8th installment and a painful turning point. After weeks of momentum building and word spreading, every major city across the prefecture had its own sizable pocket of loyal Blue Spring Ride readers. The series had reached its 8th installment, and the story had finally arrived at a critical point for the whole work. Futaba had to choose friendship, or love. No matter how badly readers wished the plot would not go there, reality was reality. The story had already stepped onto that stage. So when it came to the 8th installment, you could say every single Shiori fan in the prefecture was on maximum alert. Starting Thursday, the die-hard readers spent their days in a miserable tug-of-war. They wanted to see what happened next more than anything. But they were also terrified the story would collapse in one badly handled paragraph. If the author slipped even once, Futaba would instantly get branded with the worst labels imaginable. Selfish, or saintly in the most infuriating way. And because Blue Spring Ride leaned so heavily into the heroine's inner monologue, it was even more dangerous. One wrong line could become proof that Futaba was secretly dark on the inside. Finally, Sunday arrived. Release day for installment 8. At 7 in the morning, Aoi Kisaragi was already up. She went for a light run, ate breakfast, got herself dressed neatly, and headed straight for the bookstore. Most magazine readers were not like her. Most people did not wake up at dawn just to buy the new issue the moment it hit shelves. Normally, she was not this intense either. But the way Chapter 7 had left her hanging for days had been cruel. She could not take waiting any longer. The moment she stepped into the store, she spotted it immediately. Fleeting Blossoms was stacked in a tall, proud column right beside Crimson Maple. The cover featured an illustration from Blue Spring Ride. Soft, elegant line work, and characters drawn with that clean, beautiful charm that practically screamed show. The second she got home, Aoi ripped the plastic wrap open and flipped straight to the table of contents, hunting down Blue Spring Ride like it was a matter of life and death. The first line she saw hit her like a punch. To be honest, I've thought he was pretty great for a long time. Yuri's cheeks were flushed as she smiled gently, her voice low and shy. And then I really fell for him, in that forest. When he held my hand and helped me cross the stream. He was so kind. It made me feel safe. An opening critical hit. Futaba's best friend was talking about Kao, the boy she liked, right beside her. And Futaba could only sit there, pretending to be supportive, pretending to be happy for her, offering blessings she did not mean. It was painful to read. But was Yuri wrong? She had fallen for a single boy who was not taken, a boy who had helped her when she needed it most. The story stayed in its usual rhythm. Daily life, gentle daily life. Pages and pages of Yuri and Futaba talking endlessly, sharing secrets, pouring their hearts out, laughing the way best friends do. Their friendship was written as something genuinely beautiful. If they were not both in love with the same boy, this would have been warm and comforting. But because they were, every sweet line landed like a knife. Futaba listened as her best friend confessed her feelings for Kao, and she still had to smile, still had to encourage her, still had to tell her to do her best. This is awful, Aoi muttered, already in a bad mood. After school, Futaba and Kao were kept behind by a teacher. As class reps, they had to stay and handle leftover chores and paperwork for their homeroom. A perfectly timed assist from the teacher, creating a situation where the two of them could be alone. Futaba gripped her pen so hard her knuckles almost went white. Every time he looks at me through that gap in his bangs, even just a little, it makes my heart panic. Her expression darkened with sadness. No, I can't keep thinking like this. He's the one Yuri likes. But he's also the one you like. Aoi blurted out before she could stop herself. Before you learn to love someone else, you should learn to love yourself. That after-school classroom scene took its time, devoting a lot of space to the heroine's inner turmoil. Her spiraling thoughts. Kao's quiet, half-hidden concern for her, always there and yet never stated outright. What do I do? Every time my heart skips because of Kao. Yuri's face pops into my mind. Futaba was struggling. When the classroom chores were finally finished, Futaba reached her limit. If I stay with Kao any longer, I can't. Kao, I'll take the report to the teacher. She made up an excuse, trying to send him off first, trying to avoid being alone with him any longer. But she dragged her feet around school for half an hour, stalling, forcing herself to do things slowly, as if time could solve what her heart could not. Finally, she walked out of the school gates under an orange-red sunset. And there he was. Kao, standing at the entrance, waiting. You're still here? Futaba asked, forcing her voice to stay calm. What's wrong? What's wrong? Kao looked at her like it was obvious. I'm waiting for you. You said you had to turn in the report, so I waited until you finished. I mean, you could have gone on ahead, Futaba said. If we're going the same way, splitting up would be weird, Kao replied calmly, his gaze steady on her. Let's go home. Thump. 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 Aoi could see the whole scene in her head like an anime cut. Seriously, what was with this male lead? How could he be this charming? This was insane. On the walk to the station, Kao kept trying to find something to talk about, any topic at all to bridge the silence between them. But Futaba, because of Yuri, was terrified of getting closer. What do you do if you and your best friend like the same person? I don't want to fall for Kao. But I also want to keep loving him. But I wish someone would just pick for me. I wish someone would answer this question for me. At the station, they waited for the train. When it arrived, Kao had already bought his ticket and stepped aboard. And then Futaba spoke, suddenly. Kao. I forgot something, so. Inside her head, she formed a cruel little rule. If Kao doesn't get off, then I'll stop liking him. If he gets off, then I'll keep liking him. If he stays, I give up. If he gets off, I keep going. In just a few hundred words, the author handed an impossible decision to Kao, a boy who had no idea what was happening in her heart. Aoi's entire body tensed. If he stays, I give up. If he gets off, I keep going. Futaba repeated it over and over, staring at her shoes, unable to look at Kao inside the train, terrified of what she might see. The immersion was suffocating. Aoi clenched her fist so tightly her palm started sweating. The doors began to close. Right at the moment they were about to shut, the one honest answer inside Futaba surged to the surface, loud enough to drown everything else. Get off. In that instant, she understood. There was no such thing as a choice you could not make. She wanted him to get off. She wanted to keep loving him. The train pulled away, the sound fading into the distance. Futaba's tightly shut eyes slowly opened. She raised her head. And there, on the platform, bathed in the glow of the setting sun, stood Kao, looking at her. You forgot something at school. He said simply. Then let's go back. Futaba could only stare at him, unable to speak. I'm such a liar, she thought. I already knew what I wanted. I acted like I couldn't decide, but I knew. And in a moment like this, Kao would get off. He always would. Sorry, Yuri. That scene. Aoi felt like her chest was going to burst. It was too sweet. Her heart could not handle it. No debate. From chapter 1 to chapter 8, this was the best written sequence in the entire series. Futaba's tangled feelings, the test she forced herself to create, and Kao's gentle decision, made without knowing anything about the war inside her, all landed perfectly. On the surface, it looked like Futaba was deciding whether to love him based on whether he got off the train. In truth, the result reflected Kao's own heart. If the person waiting on that platform had been Yuri, then based on everything the story had shown so far, Kao would not have gotten off. The installment ended right there, in the moment Futaba finally confirmed her feelings. And Aoi's soul immediately filled with rage. What was this? Why did it end here? You can't cut it off there. She yelled at the page. Shiori Takahashi, you little menace, are you even human? How are you supposed to sleep at night after doing this to people? Chapter 34, a cliffhanger that sets the fandom on fire. Staring at the final lines of Blue Spring Ride Chapter 8, Aoi felt like her whole body was itching, like ants were crawling under her skin. You cannot end it there. You seriously cannot. What was Futaba going to do next? Would she confess everything to Yuri? Would the two of them fall out? Or would Futaba, carried away by that sunset and that heartbeat, finally blurt out a confession to Kao? No matter which direction it took, Aoi was hooked. And yet the chapter ended right there, at the exact worst possible moment. It was poisonous. She opened the Fleeting Blossoms forum on Crimson Maple Literature's website. As expected, the entire screen was basically Blue Spring Ride discourse. Page after page, post after post, everyone screaming into the void together. The strongest cliffhanger has arrived. I feel physically sick. Please tell me I'm not the only one. I'm a guy and even I got worked up reading that scene. Futaba looked up and Kao actually got off the train. It's not a complicated twist, but the build-up before it was so good that it hit me straight in the heart. I finally understand why girls do that thing where they want the guy to guess instead of saying it out loud. Futaba's inner choice should have been her own decision, but she tied it to Kao's actions instead. If you ask me, that's ridiculous. And yet after I finished reading, I still got moved by what Kao did. Because I was in Futaba's head, Kao felt unbelievably cool. Futaba didn't tell Kao anything, but everything Kao did landed right on the softest part of her heart. If a boy like that exists, it's honestly impossible not to fall for him. Same. If there was a girl who never said a word but somehow always knew what I wanted, like she'd leave me alone the second she sensed I wanted to game, and she'd light my cigarette the moment she knew I needed it, and she'd feed me when she knew I was hungry. I'm done, I'm giving her my whole life. But come on, it's fiction. In real life, who matches another person that perfectly, where every move is exactly what the other is thinking? That's why chapter 8 got me, though. Futaba's conflict, and the way Kao showed how much he valued her just through getting off the train. He didn't say anything, but it felt like he said everything. Shiori-sensei seriously gets it. In real life she's probably a cute, considerate high school girl just like Futaba. Only someone gentle can write scenes this gentle and create characters people love this much. Honestly, I can't wait for the day Crimson Maple finally reveals who Shiori Takahashi-sensei is. She's still a high schooler, so I get why they're protecting her identity. They don't want school life to get messed up. By the way, why are there so many guys discussing the plot? Does Blue Spring Ride really have this many male fans? Same. I feel like I'm going to stand out if I comment. This forum vibe is different than I expected. And now we have to wait days for chapter 9, sigh. It's such a waste that this is running in Fleeting Blossoms. I read both Crimson Maple and Fleeting Blossoms, and I'm not joking when I say this. Before chapter 8, I thought Blue Spring Ride would probably sit around top 3 if it ran in Crimson Maple. After this chapter, I can only say that every single one of Crimson Maple's current serialized titles has been outclassed in my heart. And yesterday's Starlight too. I thought it was just decent at first, but it genuinely gets better every chapter. It's not on Blue Spring Ride's level, but it's still an insanely good fantasy romance now. Aoi schemed through, watching the topic heat climb higher and higher, then opened the group chats she was in. The same thing was happening there too, readers passionately recommending Blue Spring Ride to anyone who would listen. So it's not just me who thinks chapter 8 was incredible, she thought, a grin creeping onto her face. And it's not just me who's suffering from that ending either. There was something comforting about that. When other people love what you love, it feels good. That's simple. And when you realize you're not the only one losing your mind, you feel strangely soothed. Did a great novel need every sentence polished like a jewel, every turn of the plot twisting and exploding non-stop? Of course not. It just needed a few moments that genuinely moved people, a few scenes that carved themselves into the heart. The first 7 chapters of Blue Spring Ride were excellent, but they hadn't fully pushed readers into that kind of emotional state. Chapter 8 did. And once it did, those readers transformed. They became unpaid evangelists, spreading the series for free across the internet, recommending it everywhere with the intensity of true believers. All day Sunday, the hype fermented and spread across every major novel forum and across Crimson Maple's own site. Fans of otaku culture loved nothing more than pushing a favorite work onto someone else, because recommending was part of the fun. For a while, it felt like if you logged into any relevant platform, you couldn't go 10 minutes without seeing the title Blue Spring Ride pop up again. The next day, Monday, after 24 hours of vote counting, the newest data for Fleeting Blossoms finally came out. Blue Spring Ride, rating 9.5, rating rank number 1. Reader support votes, 10,678, vote rank number 1. The Day We Said Goodbye, rating 8.7, rating rank number 2. Reader support votes, 5,134, vote rank number 2. Summer Fireworks, rating 8.4, rating rank number 4. Reader support votes, 4,203, vote rank number 3. Yesterday's Starlight, rating 8.7, rating rank number 3. Reader support votes, 4,125, vote rank number 4. For a publisher like Crimson Maple Literature, ratings mattered, but they were not the main thing. What the company cared about most was support votes. Votes reflected the size of a fanbase, the heat of the fandom, the ability to sell. Ratings only reflected how good readers thought the book was. Between people praise it and people show up for it, the publisher would always prioritize the second one. When Chapter 7 released, Blue Spring Ride had already taken the top spot with 6,531 votes. So in theory, Chapter 8 staying number 1 in both rating and votes should not have shocked anyone. But when the editorial department arrived at work that morning and pulled up the report, they realized they had been completely wrong. Blue Spring Ride was still number 1. But that vote count? The entire office erupted into argument. Even Yukino looked stunned. She had expected strong feedback, sure. In her mind, a jump from 6,531 votes to maybe around 7,000 was reasonable. That would have already been impressive. But over 10,000? That was absurd. That was the kind of number you did not see by accident. Chapter 35, a sudden surge in votes and popularity. Over 10,000 votes? Are you kidding me? 10,631. Is that number actually real? How did it jump that high? Blue Spring Ride blew up overnight. Readers all over the prefecture are recommending it on forums and in group chats. I've already seen 2 or 3 posts this morning alone pushing it. I predicted the numbers would rise after Chapter 8, but I never imagined it would rise this much. Are we sure the system didn't mess up? It didn't mess up. This is the real performance of Chapter 8. Honestly, this kind of thing isn't unheard of. The hardest thing in the world to predict is the market. There are only so many of us in the editorial department, and we can't represent the massive reader base out there. Sometimes our predictions are simply wrong. The real vote count is what actually shows the potential this series has in the local market. It's still insane. Fleeting Blossom sells, what, about 300,000 copies? And Blue Spring Ride pulled over 10,000 support votes. That means on average, 1 out of every 30 readers finished it and still bothered to go vote. And that's not even counting the people who never vote at all, the ones who just quietly keep buying the magazine to follow their favorite series. How high is the support rate, really? You can tell from the rating alone. A 9.5 is basically screaming how strongly readers are behind it. It's just, such a shame this series is running in Fleeting Blossoms. If it had debuted in Crimson Maple instead. The moment one editor said that out loud in the shared office area, the room fell silent. The flagship magazine Crimson Maple sold somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 copies every issue. Almost triple Fleeting Blossoms. And yet even there, among the 14 serialized titles, only 1 or 2 series per issue typically broke 10,000 support votes. In the 5 major publishing houses of the prefecture, each company had a signature magazine like that, the kind you put on the front page of your brand and use as proof of power. And in this prefecture, it had been 8 years since any author had achieved 10,000 votes while serializing in a non-top tier magazine. Blue Spring Ride had just snapped that record that had held for nearly a decade. There was no denying it anymore. Serializing Blue Spring Ride in Fleeting Blossoms really did feel like hiding a masterpiece in the back row. Talking about if doesn't change anything, someone said, breaking the silence. Shiori Takahashi was a newcomer when he submitted. Nobody could have known the series would end up performing like this. I know, another editor replied. I'm just regretting the missed chance. If it ran in Crimson Maple, it might have boosted the magazine's sales too. Maybe we could have pushed toward 900,000 copies per issue. And its popularity would have doubled at least. After the tankobon release, it might even have had a shot at breaking into this year's local bestseller rankings for light novel volumes. Yeah, that's the painful part. Yukino stood quietly in a corner near the office walkway, listening to them talk. She agreed with them. It was a waste. But there was no way around it. There had never been a precedent where a brand new light novel author got to serialize in Crimson Maple right from the start. Sometimes, Yukino murmured under her breath, if you want to become famous, you need at least a little luck too, Haruto. These past 2 days at school, Haruto kept hearing students talk about Blue Spring Ride's plot as well. After all, it had already been officially confirmed that both Shiori and Eri were students at Minamijo 3rd High, so the school naturally paid extra attention to Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight. After Chapter 8 dropped, it got even crazier. Quite a few students had spontaneously formed things like the Minamijo 3rd High Shiori Takahashi fan club. And about 60 to 70% of the members were boys. Boys in that awkward, restless age who were full of dreamy admiration for a rumored genius high school girl author. They had already guessed through every famous pretty girl in the school by name. But even now, nobody knew who Shiori Takahashi actually was. Or who Eri was. Their real identities were still a mystery. This feels kind of dangerous, Haruto muttered, his expression turning weird. Blue Spring Ride keeps getting more popular, but everyone at school and in the prefecture's light novel community keeps insisting Shiori Takahashi is a girl. A cute one, too. If I ever have to reveal the truth for some reason. He swallowed. Am I going to get jumped by an angry mob of betrayed male fans? Just imagining it made his sense of impending doom flare up. Meanwhile, in Class 7, during the break between periods, Reina sat at her desk without saying a word. Ever since she'd finished reading Chapter 8 last night, her mood had been low. Because Chapter 8 was just too good. And it left her feeling defeated. She had basically finished drafting the full manuscript of yesterday's Starlight already. All that remained were detail edits and polishing. That was why she knew, with painful clarity, what the truth was. Yesterday's Starlight was not going to beat Blue Spring Ride. Not even close. Across her entire novel, there wasn't a single scene that hit the way Blue Spring Ride Chapter 8 did. Ha! Reina let out a quiet sigh. And without meaning to, she pictured Haruto. How did that guy write something like this? He was a boy. How could he create a heroine like Futaba, a girl who was so adorable not just in how she acted, but in how she thought? Was there really such a thing as someone born knowing? Someone who could imagine their way past differences in perspective and still write a romance that made people melt? Reina couldn't understand it. She only knew one thing. Losing to Haruto hurt. I can't keep thinking about this, she told herself, pressing her lips together. Yesterday's Starlight is almost finished. Instead of drowning in defeat, I should be thinking about what comes next. I should be thinking about how to write an even better new series, and beat him with that. But even as she tried to fire herself up, one thought slipped into her mind anyway, sharp and uncontrollable. What if I lose to him again in the new series? Her gaze hardened. A painful memory surfaced, the humiliation of getting crushed by him in that fighting game again and again. She didn't even need half a second to answer her own question. Then I'll just keep chasing you. I'll fix my eyes on you and never look away. I refuse to believe you can beat me for the rest of your life. To Haruto, that platform scene where Kao and Futaba finally reached a decision, where they quietly confirmed their feelings under the orange glow of evening, was the true highlight of Blue Spring Ride. Everything after that was still great, but once Futaba's heart settled and she started moving toward action, the shimmering mystery of the story inevitably began to fade. What stage is the most addictive in a youth romance? The uncertain stage. When both leads have feelings, but neither of them has fully realized that the feeling is love. That is where the heart flutters the hardest. Once the heroine and hero both understand what they want, once the plot starts leaning toward a confession, the tension naturally drops. Still, Blue Spring Ride had one huge hook left. Even if Futaba had chosen her feelings, there was still the question of Yuri, and how the two best friends would handle each other. That was why Chapter 9 remained just as strong as ever. The reader support votes climbed to 11,323, and the rating held steady. At that point, it was basically the ceiling of what Fleeting Blossoms could offer. The magazine only sold 300,000 copies. For a single series to pull over 10,000 votes was already as high as it could reasonably go. As Wednesday passed, another deadline began to loom larger in Haruto's mind. Not the serialization. Not the weekly ranking. But something else. The planned tankobon release date. The first collected volumes of Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight were only 2 days away. They keep calling it a nationwide release, Haruto thought, but outside our prefecture, there's basically no marketing at all. I honestly have no idea what the total national sales are going to look like. And he cared. A lot. Because at a cover price of around 1,500 yen per volume, he earned about 150 yen per copy in royalties. Which meant every single volume sold directly affected how much money ended up in his pocket. Chapter 36, School Buzz and Growing Pressure. Even before the 9th installment of Blue Spring Ride was released in the magazine, Crimson Maple Literature had already begun preparing for the release of the novel's standalone volume. Naturally, the scale of the promotion was not especially large. Crimson Maple Literature handled many serialized works at the same time, and its overall resources were limited. Still, within the Minamijo Prefecture, the momentum was undeniable. Thanks to Blue Spring Ride's explosive popularity during its serialization in Fleeting Blossoms, combined with the publisher's measured promotional push and nearly a full week of organic buzz generated by fans online, anticipation for the standalone release steadily built. Not every reader enjoyed following novels through weekly or bi-weekly magazine serialization. After all, a single magazine carried more than a dozen titles at once, and most readers were only interested in one or two of them. Buying a full magazine every issue for a single story felt inefficient to many people. Because of this, a sizable group of light novel fans in Japan preferred to buy tankobon editions only. From their perspective, truly good works would always be collected into volumes sooner or later, allowing them to avoid the frustration of fragmented weekly reading. Through word of mouth surrounding Blue Spring Ride, many of these readers gradually became curious. Light novel discussion groups began buzzing. Is this novel really as good as everyone says? I heard Chapter 8 is what made it blow up. The first volume comes out on the 25th, right? How far does the story go? For a debut author to top both popularity and rating charts in Fleeting Blossoms is already insane, but a 9.5 rating? That's hard to ignore. 9.5? The series I've been following, The Day We Said Goodbye, is only at 8.7. Now I'm actually getting interested. News spread quickly among readers throughout Minamijo. Even people who had never followed Fleeting Blossoms were now waiting specifically for the standalone release, eager to see whether Blue Spring Ride truly lived up to its reputation. Outside the region, however, the situation was very different. While Crimson Maple Publishing did have a functional nationwide distribution network, its overall influence, advertising budget, and promotional reach were still limited. Beyond Minamijo, Blue Spring Ride barely registered in fan discussions. Bookstores stocked a few copies out of courtesy. If they sold, great. If they did not, the unsold stock would simply be returned to the publisher under standard agreements. Friday arrived. It was the day before the release of both Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight as standalone volumes. It was also the day when Chapter 10 of both novels was serialized. And, as usual, it was manuscript submission day. Haruto and Reina arrived at Yukino's place together. Yukino was wearing a deep red dress, her long hair loose over her shoulders. She greeted them with a gentle smile. After carefully reviewing both manuscripts, she leaned back and let out a slow breath. Very good, she said sincerely. Both of these are extremely well written. Her gaze lingered on Reina for a moment before shifting to Haruto. Yesterday's Starlight is clearly entering its final phase, she continued. But Haruto, no matter how I look at it, Blue Spring Ride still feels like it has room to grow. The later arc has so much potential. Why are you so determined to end it here? Haruto paused. Then he answered calmly. Because, if I keep writing it longer, the work itself won't be as good. As he spoke, fragments of Shiori's memories surfaced in his mind. They showed him the later developments of the original manga version of Blue Spring Tide. To be honest, the early part of the story was excellent. The first dozen or so episodes of the anime adaptation in that other world were widely praised. But what followed afterward? In Haruto's eyes, the story shifted from youthful romance to prolonged emotional suffering. The male lead, Kao, was emotionally cornered and manipulated by a scheming secondary heroine. The female lead, Futaba, even entered a relationship with the second male lead, Toma, only for it to fall apart, dragging everyone back into an exhausting cycle with Kao. Haruto could only conclude that fans in that other world were astonishingly tolerant. He had no intention of recreating that. For him, Blue Spring Ride was about youth itself. Once the heart of that story had been told, it was better to stop. The later entanglements and emotional torture were unnecessary. I understand, Yukino said softly after a moment. Then, after this week's submission, next week will be the final one. There was a hint of reluctance in her voice. Her relationships with most authors were purely professional. But the past 2 months working with Haruto and Reina felt different. It was closer to friendship. Once the series ended, she did not know when they would sit together like this again. Time really flies, she said. It really does, Reina replied quietly. It's already been 2 months since the new semester started. Her eyes drifted toward Haruto. Even now, her novel had still not surpassed his in performance. By the way, Yukino added, changing the topic, have either of you started seriously planning your next work? Reina frowned slightly. I thought about more than 10 different stories, she said. But none of them feel strong enough yet. Progress is slow. Her gaze flicked toward Haruto again. And you? Yukino asked him directly. Me? Haruto blinked. Honestly, I haven't had any inspiration at all. So I've made zero progress. Without new memories from Shiori surfacing, there was nothing he could draw from. Yukino fell silent for a moment. Then she spoke with a more serious tone. You need to accelerate. Between mid-May and early June, Crimson Maple is expected to open 1 or 2 serialization slots. 2 existing works are likely to conclude around that time. The meaning was immediately clear to both of them. Crimson Maple Journal did not always have open slots. When one appeared, it was a rare opportunity that countless authors competed for. Reina felt a surge of pressure. Haruto, on the other hand, felt oddly calm. Inspiration was not something he could force. If the memories came, they came. At the moment, what truly concerned him was something else entirely. By the way, Yukino, he asked, the first volume of Blue Spring Ride only goes up to chapter 8, right? That's right, she replied. The total word count wasn't enough for 3 volumes, so the publisher decided on 2. Also, chapter 8 ends at a perfect stopping point. They want to use that cliffhanger to drive buzz and boost sales. Although chapters 7 and 8 had only just been serialized that week, Haruto had actually submitted them nearly 3 weeks earlier. That was why the volume could include them. After hesitating for a moment, Haruto asked the question he had been holding back. Based on the publisher's past experience, Yukino, what kind of results do you think our 2 novels might achieve as standalone volumes? The room fell quiet. Reina straightened slightly. Yukino's expression also became focused. Chapter 37, Facing Defeat and Planning What Comes Next. You already know this, Yukino said, brushing her hair back behind her ear as her expression turned serious. Our publishing house's influence is basically limited to Minamijo Prefecture. Under normal circumstances, based on the popularity of yesterday's Starlight, its average volume sales within Minamijo should land somewhere between 70,000 and 90,000 copies. As for the other prefectural regions across Japan, if they collectively contribute another 5 to 10,000 copies per volume, that would already be considered a good result. She paused briefly, then continued. As for Blue Spring Ride, honestly speaking, judging from its explosive performance in Fleeting Blossoms, its expected average volume sales within Minamijo alone should reach around 250,000 copies. 250,000 copies per volume. That was triple her own estimate. Reina's brows immediately knit together. She had known Blue Spring Ride would outperform her novel in standalone sales, but she had not expected the publisher's internal expectations to be this much higher. Haruto, meanwhile, fell into quiet thought. Through Shiori's memories, he already had a rough understanding of the original manga's performance in that other world. At its peak, during 1 or 2 golden years of serialization, the manga's annual tankobon sales ranked within the top 20 nationwide, with total yearly sales reaching 4 to 5 million copies. That figure was the combined total of multiple volumes. By the time the series concluded, Blue Spring Tide had accumulated around 12 million copies sold overall, which translated to roughly 1 million copies per volume on average. Of course, novels and manga could not be directly compared. Different worlds had different market structures, and the proportion of anime and light novel fans varied as well. Even so, Haruto did not believe Japan's current otaku culture was weaker than that parallel world's. From his perspective, the projected numbers still felt conservative. What are those faces supposed to mean? Yukino said, half amused and half exasperated when she saw both of them looking dissatisfied. Do not underestimate what these numbers represent. An average of tens of thousands or even 200,000 per volume is already excellent. If a novel runs for 10 or more volumes, total sales can easily break into the millions, and the royalties alone would be substantial. Most novels serialized in Crimson Maple do not even reach an average of 100,000 per volume within Minamijo. Even top-tier titles usually cap out at 3 to 400,000 per volume, and that is with massive promotional resources backing them. She looked directly at Haruto. If not for the fact that Blue Spring Ride clearly demonstrates quality that exceeds the usual level of Fleeting Blossoms, the publishing house would never allocate promotional resources to it at the level of a strong Crimson Maple title. An estimate of 250,000 per volume simply does not happen for novels serialized in Fleeting Blossoms under normal circumstances. They both understood her reasoning. Reina felt frustrated because she was once again being outpaced by Haruto. As for Haruto, he was experiencing firsthand just how much a serialization platform influenced a work's popularity. The saying that gold will always shine was true, but gold displayed in a gallery and gold buried in a pigsty were seen by vastly different numbers of people. In that parallel world, a novel or manga achieving 1 to 2 million copies per volume was already considered outstanding. In this version of Japan, which had a lot more population than the parallel world, a truly top-tier work would need several million, or even 10 million copies per volume, to earn that title. That was the true summit of anime and light novel creation in this world. With 10 or 20 volumes, total sales could easily surpass 100 million copies, and the creator's royalties would naturally reach astronomical figures. However, that path was brutally competitive. Crimson Maple Literature's top titles only achieved averages in the tens or hundreds of thousands precisely because its distribution power was limited to Minamijo. If Blue Spring Ride were published under a top national giant like Clearstream Library, then extrapolating from its performance in the parallel world and factoring in Japan's population, several million copies per volume would barely count as acceptable, let alone exceptional. That would mean selling 300,000 to 400,000 copies per volume in each of Japan's major regions combined. Unfortunately, reality was reality. Crimson Maple Literature's reach ended at Minamijo. After submitting their manuscripts, Haruto and Reina returned to their usual routine of game battles. By now, Haruto could no longer win every match effortlessly. Reina learned fast, and her fighting game skills had improved dramatically in a short time. Even a top-ranked player could slip up after dozens of matches. Last week, Haruto had finally lost a match to her due to a misplay. The frustration she had bottled up for weeks finally dissipated, and today she played with noticeably lighter spirits. That said, after a few more rounds, she was still thoroughly defeated. "Haruto," Reina suddenly asked, her eyes still fixed on the screen, "are you planning to make writing your lifelong profession?" Haruto glanced at her. She actually cared about this sort of thing? "Probably," he answered after a moment's thought. "I honestly cannot think of any other job that makes more money while being this relaxed." Relaxed? Her fingers froze. That was bad. Haruto's eyes lit up as he spotted an opening. A heavy strike, a spinning blow, an aerial finisher. 5 seconds later, her character collapsed. Another win. A deep sense of satisfaction rose in Haruto as he looked at her smugly. Reina, however, looked distinctly unsettled. "You really think writing Blue Spring Ride was easy?" she asked. "More or less," he replied. "It felt pretty simple to me. After all, writing something that already existed in memory mostly taxed his fingers, not his mind." Reina lowered her head and fell silent. The atmosphere turned awkward. "And you?" Haruto asked, trying to ease it. "Do you plan to become a professional novelist in the future?" "I do not know," she said quietly. "I do not know how much pressure my family would put on me if they found out I was writing novels. And I do not know if I could withstand that pressure." She looked up at him. "But these past 2 months taught me something. Someone who looks ordinary on the surface might possess talent far beyond others in a different field. I do not know if I will keep writing forever," she continued. "But one thing is certain." She did not say the rest. If she ever gave up writing, she would make sure she defeated Haruto in sales first, washing away the humiliation of yesterday's Starlight's loss. She did not say it aloud, because empty bravado from a loser only invited contempt. Winners did not need to speak. Haruto did not press her. Whatever she left unsaid was not his business. They were just classmates who happened to cross paths for a short time. Once the Blue Spring Ride ended next week, who knew when they would meet again? He shook his head and let the topic drop. The next day, Saturday. On that day, more than 90% of bookstores across Minamijo quietly placed 2 new light novel volumes in prominent positions. One was titled Blue Spring Ride. The other was yesterday's Starlight. Outside Minamijo, bookstores in other regions stocked a few copies in quieter corners. The standalone release of Blue Spring Ride had officially begun. Chapter 38, Preparing for the End of the Current Series. March 25, Saturday. For most people in Japan, it was just another ordinary weekend. But for a large group of novel fans in the Minamijo Prefecture, who had already been bombarded online by Blue Spring Ride readers relentlessly recommending the book over the past few weeks, this day carried a very different sense of anticipation. Light novel readers in Minamijo could roughly be divided into many different camps. There were die-hard fans of Crimson Maple Literature's flagship youth romance titles, devoted readers of Cloud Peak Library's mystery and suspense light novels, and enthusiasts of fantasy battle series published by Imagination Press. Because of differences in taste and limited personal time, it was impossible for anyone to follow every magazine or buy every series. However, once a publishing house produced a genuinely high-quality work, these different reader communities would inevitably recommend it to each other through group chats and online forums. Even readers who normally did not care much for youth romance novels did not mind occasionally changing things up. Many were willing to buy the standalone volume and see for themselves whether Blue Spring Ride, the highly praised series serialized under Crimson Maple Literature, truly lived up to the hype. Early in the morning, in most bookstores across Minamijo, Two standalone novels were placed prominently on shelves near the entrance. Blue Spring Ride and Yesterday's Starlight. At the same time, bookstores had swapped out their posters for new promotional displays featuring both titles. The slogans on the posters were broadly similar. They all focused on the impressive serialization results the two novels had achieved in Fleeting Blossoms, combined with heavy emphasis on the fact that both authors were high school students. The copy was exaggerated, flashy, and designed to grab attention in every possible way. After all, neither the 5 major Minamijo publishing houses nor the nationally famous novelists had any new releases scheduled around this time. The timing of the standalone releases for Haruto and Reina Fujimoto's novels was unusually favorable, with no serious competition. As a result, many local Minamijo readers were immediately drawn to the promotional posters the moment they entered a bookstore. To readers, all of this felt perfectly normal. New standalone novels were released, bookstores put up posters, and the books were placed in eye-catching locations. That was how things usually worked. But in reality, this level of treatment was reserved for books published by major nationwide publishers or top-tier Minamijo-based publishing houses. Crimson Maple Literature happened to be headquartered in Minamijo, and its industry influence was not insignificant. That was why it could negotiate with retailers to secure this level of visibility for its titles. Outside Minamijo, however, the situation was very different. In medium and large cities across Japan, most bookstores had indeed stocked a few copies of Blue Spring Ride and Yesterday's Starlight. But those copies were usually tucked away in quiet corners. Crimson Maple Literature simply did not have much influence beyond Minamijo. Within Minamijo, sales of both standalone volumes steadily climbed from the early morning onward. Outside the region, things were noticeably quieter. Still, there would always be people who enjoyed digging for hidden gems. Miori Sato was one of them. She had no particular hobbies beyond reading, and on weekends like this, she usually spent her free time wandering through bookstores in search of something interesting. For readers who had just fallen into the light novel world, the early stage was the happiest. There were countless excellent works waiting to be discovered, and almost anything felt enjoyable. But as the years passed, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years, and the number of books read continued to grow, formulaic plots stopped stirring any excitement in veteran readers. Even if there were 10,000 novels she had never read, most of them failed to spark even the slightest emotional response. After wandering through the bookstore for an entire hour, Miori realized that not a single recently released book had managed to catch her interest. Blue Spring Ride? Yesterday's Starlight. When she spotted the two novels in a secluded corner of the store, her first instinct was to walk right past them. Then a line of promotional text on the cover caught her eye. A debut work by genius high school novelist Shiori Takahashi. A deeply moving masterpiece that scored 9.5 from over 10,000 readers during its serialization under Crimson Maple Literature. 9.5. Miori stopped in her tracks. Advertising regulations in Japan were strict. Publishers could exaggerate stylistically, but outright false claims were forbidden. Phrases like a masterpiece you will regret missing or a tearjerker that moved millions were allowed as subjective descriptions. But a concrete claim like 10,000 readers giving a 9.5 rating had to be real. 9.5. Is that even possible? Miori knew the current state of the novel industry well. No matter the size of a magazine's circulation, readers were extremely picky. They might not harshly nitpick every flaw, but their definition of what qualified as excellent was very strict. A novel with an 8.0 rating was not necessarily outstanding. Many readers found books boring but would not deliberately give low scores unless the plot was genuinely unbearable, such as killing off the protagonist's entire family for no reason or inserting absurd betrayal arcs. But a novel maintaining a 9.5 rating under 10,000 reviews was absurdly rare. Once a book crossed the 9.0 threshold, every 0.1 increase became exponentially harder. It was like the difference between raising a test score from 60 to 90 versus raising it from 90 to 95. Well, I'm bored anyway. I might as well take it home and see, Miori muttered. After spending an hour in the bookstore with nothing to show for it, leaving empty-handed felt worse. She paid and brought both books home. She was the type of person who saved the strawberry on her cake for the very last bite. From the descriptions alone, it was obvious that Blue Spring Ride was considered the stronger work. Which meant she would read Yesterday's Starlight first. She peeled off the plastic wrap and opened the book with a critical, almost harsh gaze, letting her eyes fall on the very first line of the novel. That day, I met a black cat. A few minutes later, the quiet sound of turning pages filled the room. At first, she flipped through the pages quickly. But gradually, the pace slowed. She needed time to stop and think. This was a novel that demanded attention. Chapter 39, Fans Are Angry. 2 hours later. Hey! Miori's incredulous voice echoed through the room. So the story can twist like that. The plot of yesterday's Starlight continued replaying in her mind. For a moment, she even felt slightly suffocated. She closed her eyes and carefully reorganized the entire storyline in her head. Then another problem surfaced. Why does it end here? She burst out angrily. What is wrong with these authors? Why has every single one of them mastered the art of cutting the story at the worst possible moment? She complained loudly, but in her heart, the pen name Eri, the so-called genius high school novelist published under Crimson Maple Literature, had already left a deep impression. It was true that, from a structural perspective, some parts of the story still felt a little immature. But the further she read, the more obvious it became how dramatically the quality improved with each chapter. If she really is a debut novelist, then this is kind of amazing. Her potential is huge. A first work this good could easily earn her a place in the light novel scene someday. Miori did not write novels herself, but she had absolute confidence in her ability to judge quality. This is only rated 8.7? That feels low. There was a page in the tankobon volume that briefly introduced yesterday's Starlight and its serialization data. After reading it, Miori genuinely felt that Minamijo readers were undervaluing the book. She personally loved it. Alright. Now let's see what kind of monster this 9.5 rated novel is, the one that was serialized alongside yesterday's Starlight and Fleeting Blossoms. She could find the basic information for Blue Spring Ride on another page near the front of the book. Just don't tell me it's worse than yesterday's Starlight. She complained like that, but still quickly flipped open the first page of Blue Spring Ride. Compared to most youth romance novels aimed at girls, Blue Spring Ride started much faster. Most stories in this genre followed a familiar pattern. The male and female leads meet by chance. They gradually interact for various reasons. Then, through a series of youthful and ambiguous moments, they slowly fall for each other. Just going through that formula usually took 3 or 4 chapters in a serialized novel. But Blue Spring Ride used barely a couple thousand words in its first chapter to convey something very clear to the reader. Kao and Futaba were the male and female leads. They liked each other. And after losing contact for 3 years, they reunited in high school. Miori became absorbed in Blue Spring Ride at least 2 or 3 times faster than she had with yesterday's Starlight. Before she realized it, the room was filled only with the sound of her steady breathing and the soft rustle of turning pages. Futaba and Kao's reunion in high school. The formation of Futaba's friendship with Yuri, the adorable girl ostracized by their classmates. Miori Sato's eyes grew intensely focused. Her fingers curled and relaxed unconsciously. The immersion was so strong that she found herself emotionally reacting to everything Futaba experienced. By the time she reached chapter 2, she already had an extremely high opinion of the novel's quality. After all, any story that could capture the attention of a veteran reader of over 10 years within a couple thousand words deserved its 9.5 rating. She genuinely had not expected that a relatively obscure second-tier magazine from Minamijo could produce 2 novels of this caliber. Yesterday's Starlight stood out through its originality and concept. Blue Spring Ride, on the other hand, left her with nothing to criticize. The pacing was smooth, the plot flowed naturally, and everything felt perfectly balanced. However, as she read through chapter 7, irritation began creeping in. Yuri developed romantic feelings for Kao after he saved her, and she even confessed everything to Futaba, her closest friend. Then came Futaba's internal struggle. Should she choose herself and continue loving Kao, or should she give up her feelings for the sake of her friendship? Please don't turn her into some self-sacrificing saint heroine, Miori muttered anxiously. I finally found such a good novel. Please, author, do not mess this up. By now, she was completely absorbed. Without noticing, the afternoon had already arrived. Then she reached chapter 8. The now iconic scene at the station platform, the moment of choice at the closing train doors, shattered her emotional defenses completely. If he gets off the train, I'll keep loving Kao. If he doesn't, I'll give up on him. As Miori read the detailed depiction of Futaba's inner turmoil, she felt the same tight, breathless tension rising in her own chest. Get off the train. In the novel, accompanied by Futaba's desperate inner cry, the calm and handsome face of the boy appeared under the glow of the setting sun. From helping Futaba with school duties, to waiting alone for half an hour at the school gate just to walk home with her, to this moment where Futaba made an unreasonable request and Kao stepped off the train without asking a single question. When a boy likes you, this is the kind of understanding he gives. The story was simple. Kao never once verbally expressed lingering feelings for Futaba. And yet, through his actions alone, the reader understood perfectly. Kao still loved her. The moment Miori imagined the scene in her head, her inner teenage heart exploded. Her fingers tightened around the page. The paper quality felt good, but she was already desperate to read what came next. Would Futaba and Yuri finally confront each other and compete fairly for Kao? Would Yuri darken and turn against Futaba? Or would the story take some kind of compromise route? No matter how it developed, one thing was certain. Kao got off the train. Which meant Futaba had a place in his heart. A simple plot, supported by heavy psychological depiction and 2 full chapters of build-up, exploded at the very end of chapter 8 and released all the reader's emotions at once. Miori felt incredibly satisfied after reading it. Full of anticipation, she turned the page. What would happen next? Her expression froze instantly. Instead of the continuation of chapter 8, she saw a single line. End of Volume 1. Please look forward to Blue Spring Ride Volume 2. The release date is coming soon. In that instant, a massive wave of frustration surged straight into her chest. What is this? She shouted in disbelief. Coming soon, my ass. What does soon mean? What month, what day, what time? What kind of divine operation was this? What publisher would end a standalone volume here? Who could possibly sleep after finishing Volume 1 of Blue Spring Ride? This cliffhanger was criminal. So annoying. She sat there for a long time, unable to calm down. Then she remembered the novel's 9.5 rating. 9.5. Ha! If Shiori did not pull these shameless cliffhanger stunts, would readers really have docked half a point? Serves you right. Serves you right for only having a 9.5. The resentment and desperate curiosity for the continuation pushed her to do something she rarely did. She picked up her phone. She scanned the QR code printed in the book and was redirected to Crimson Maple Literature's website. More precisely, to the discussion forum dedicated to Fleeting Blossoms. The moment the page loaded, her screen was flooded with furious posts about Blue Spring Ride's cliffhanger. The forum was packed to the brim. Out-of-prefecture readers and Minamijo locals alike had taken over the entire space. All of them were people who had bought the Blue Spring Ride tankobon volume that day from bookstores across Japan. They had binge-read from Chapter 1 to Chapter 8 in one sitting. Because it was a standalone volume, the reading experience was smooth and uninterrupted, unlike following a serialized magazine week by week. But precisely because of that smoothness, the emotional build-up had been even stronger. When they hit the cliffhanger at the end of Chapter 8, their frustration far surpassed that of the original magazine readers. Most people could not hold back. They logged into Crimson Maple Literature's site and started venting immediately. Meanwhile, long-time Fleeting Blossoms readers gleefully fanned the flames. What could be more satisfying than watching others fall into the same pit you once fell into? That night, the official Fleeting Blossoms forum was bursting with traffic. Of course, among the countless angry posts about the insane ending of Volume 1, there were also many readers offering to buy copies of Fleeting Blossoms issues containing Chapters 9 and 10 of Blue Spring Ride. Magazine issues, once missed, could not be purchased again through normal channels. For readers who could not wait for the unknown release date of Volume 2, the only option left was to hunt down magazine readers willing to sell their copies through the forum. Chapter 40, Waiting for Sales and the Future Beyond Serialization. Who at the publishing house approved this? Are they out of their minds? Ending Chapter 7 or 9 would have been fine, but they just had to cut it at Chapter 8. I feel terrible. Seriously, girls, this cliffhanger hurts so much. Can anyone who followed the magazine tell us what happens next? I'll pay triple the price for the issue of Fleeting Blossoms that has Chapter 9 of Blue Spring Ride. DM me if you're selling. I honestly never expected a Minamijo-based publisher to put out something this good. Can someone local tell me what happens after Chapter 8? I'm also willing to pay 3 times the price. I can't sleep tonight. I never paid much attention to Crimson Maple Literature's romance novels before. I only bought the volume because I kept seeing Blue Spring Ride fans recommending it everywhere at night. I admit it, the novel is amazing, but why does it have to end like this? Did the author do this on purpose? Even if Shiori really is that rumored high school girl genius, I still can't forgive this. But is this really her fault? Where a standalone volume ends isn't the author's call, right? That's decided by the publisher. I don't know about that. But this novel was serialized first, wasn't it? Which means chapter 8 already ended like this back then. So we're not wrong to complain. This is unforgivable. I won't be able to sleep tonight. Ever since I finished Blue Spring Ride, my head is full of cow, futaba, yuri, and romance. This novel is seriously good, but why does it feel like it isn't famous at all? I think it's better than a lot of nationally famous romance novels. If I hadn't randomly bought it today, I probably would have missed it completely. There was barely any promotion. Well, this is a Minamijo publisher after all. They don't have much influence outside the region. How could they afford to heavily promote a standalone volume by a high school debut author? On the forum, more than 80% of the posters were locals from Minamijo. The remaining 20% were readers from other prefectures who had come specifically to post. This situation caught the Crimson Maple literature staff responsible for operations completely off guard. Under normal circumstances, when Crimson Maple released standalone volumes, they were technically distributed nationwide. However, due to the lack of promotion outside Minamijo, sales in other prefectures were usually miserable. If all other prefectures combined managed 6,000 or 7,000 copies, that was already considered decent. But tonight, the number of out-of-prefecture readers drawn to the Fleeting Blossoms forum because of the Blue Spring Ride was clearly far higher than usual. Even among Minamijo readers, the number of comments, new threads, thread popularity, and page views had all surged far beyond normal levels. It feels like the first volume sales of Blue Spring Ride might exceed the publisher's expectations by quite a bit, a Crimson Maple literature employee said to himself late at night while reviewing the data. For light novel standalone volumes, sales are usually measured by first week and first month figures. While the actual sales numbers for Blue Spring Ride were not yet available, this level of discussion alone suggested the results would not be bad. Yukino, Haruto, and Reina were all paying close attention to the forum discussions about their novels that night. On the surface, readers were venting their anger about the cliffhanger. In reality, it proved how strongly the first volume had hooked them. What a waste, Yukino sighed softly. Judging from the feedback to the standalone release, if Blue Spring Ride had been serialized on a stronger platform, such as Starfield Publishing or Clearstream Library, those publishers would have had the ability to promote and distribute the volume nationwide on a large scale. In that case, Blue Spring Ride might really have become a nationally popular light novel. Of course, this was just Yukino's personal opinion. Individual taste often diverged from market reality. And as an editor at Crimson Maple Literature, thoughts like these clearly conflicted with the company's interests. She quickly pushed those stray thoughts out of her mind. Reina scrolled through the forum posts from top to bottom. More than 90% of the threads were discussing Blue Spring Ride's plot. There were very few mentions of yesterday's Starlight. She could not help but sigh as well. Late at night, lying on her bed and gazing at the starlight outside the window, she spoke softly to herself. Pull yourself together. Work harder. You already know yesterday's Starlight isn't as good as Blue Spring Ride. What's the point of feeling so down now? As for Haruto, his thoughts were much calmer. This seems fine. Crimson Maple predicted that the total sales of Blue Spring Ride Volume 1 would be around 250,000 copies. Judging by this level of hype, that number should be achievable, he said while analyzing the data. There is a fairly stable relationship between a standalone novel's weekly sales, monthly sales, and total sales. Generally speaking, first week sales account for roughly half of the first month's total. Meanwhile, the first month usually makes up 70 to 80% of the book's lifetime sales. For most normally popular, standard-length novels, you can roughly estimate the final total by taking the first week sales and multiplying them by 3. Of course, this does not apply to long-running series that serialize for years. Those maintain constant exposure and steadily gain fans, so their standalone sales continue to grow. But for short to medium-length novels like Blue Spring Ride or Yesterday's Starlight, which wrapped up in about 2 months, the popularity only lasted a few months. Their standalone sales naturally would not be sustained long-term. For Crimson Maple Literature, if Blue Spring Ride Volume 1 sells over 70,000 copies in its first week, that's a passing grade. Hitting 100,000 would already be excellent. If it reaches 120,000, that's beyond expectations in the publisher's eyes. Since first week sales are roughly 1/3 of total sales, an extra 20 or 30,000 copies in the first week translates to over 100,000 more in final volume sales. If the series runs 10 volumes or more, that difference becomes a matter of millions of copies by the end. In Minamijo, a difference of just a few tens of thousands in first week sales is enough for many people to consider two books to be on completely different levels. With his thoughts sorted out, Haruto did not dwell on it further. He turned off the lights and went to sleep. The next day was Sunday. Chapter 10 of Blue Spring Ride was released alongside the new issue of the magazine. That day, sales of Fleeting Blossoms were unusually smooth. Normally, copies would only sell out by the following day, but many bookstore owners found that their stock was already gone by 6 in the evening. Part of this was because readers who had bought the standalone volume joined the ranks of magazine followers. Another part was due to people seizing a business opportunity. Fleeting Blossoms did not have distribution channels in other prefectures, so out-of-prefecture readers had no way to buy it locally. However, they could simply commission Minamijo locals to buy copies for them and mail them out. It cost a small service fee and shipping, but that was far better than waiting indefinitely for Blue Spring Ride Volume 2 to be released. Chapter 41, Sales Surge and Strange Momentum. Crimson Maple Literature had no idea about the behind-the-scenes behavior of those fans. What they did notice, however, was that the sales department was thoroughly stunned by the numbers for this issue of Fleeting Blossoms. After all, the previous issue of Fleeting Blossoms had sold only 305,600 copies. This issue, however, had suddenly jumped to 360,000. In just a few days, sales had increased by 50 to 60,000 copies. It was strange, no matter how they looked at it. The sales team could not help but feel uneasy. And the oddities did not stop with the magazine sales. There was also the issue of the Blue Spring Ride standalone volume. Whether in Minamijo or outside the region, partnered distributors kept calling, urging Crimson Maple to ship more copies of Blue Spring Ride. Of course, this was not because the first volume had already sold out. It had only been on sale for one day. There was no way it could have disappeared that fast. Rather, based on the sales data from the first day, distributors had sensed that the initial print run of 80,000 copies was likely not going to be enough. That was why they were proactively requesting additional stock. As for the exact sales performance of Blue Spring Ride, Crimson Maple would still have to wait until next Saturday, when the first week of standalone sales was officially tallied. On Monday, the results for Chapter 10 of Blue Spring Ride were released. The rating remained unchanged, while the fan vote count climbed to 12,898. What surprised the staff at Crimson Maple was that Blue Spring Ride still had room to grow in fan votes. Whether it was standalone volumes or serialized magazines, performance metrics often lagged behind real-world reactions. Just like how Crimson Maple did not yet understand why this issue of Fleeting Blossoms had seen such a noticeable boost in sales, neither the publisher nor the distributors really understood why Blue Spring Ride's standalone sales were performing far better than expected, both within Minamijo and outside it. At its core, Blue Spring Ride was a commercial work that had already survived brutal competition and extreme market saturation in another world. At the very least, within the youth romance manga genre, it was absolutely among the top-tier titles. At the height of its popularity, the manga version of Blue Spring Ride ranked just below a handful of legendary romance series like Kimi and Itaudok. For readers in this world, including the staff at Crimson Maple, they knew the novel was excellent. But the word excellent covered too wide a range. Its boundaries were vague, much like labels such as good, average, or poor. People at Crimson Maple, including Yukino, could only roughly judge that Blue Spring Ride was very good. The real question was how good it would be in the market. No one truly knew. Estimates like 100,000 or 200,000 copies per volume were nothing more than educated guesses based on past experience. The market itself was not rigid. It was fluid. After the first volume of Blue Spring Ride went on sale on Saturday and fans spent an entire day flooding the publisher's forums with complaints and lingering discussions, something subtle began to change. Starting Sunday, in Minamijo as well as across Japan, similar posts quietly began appearing on various light novel forums. Guys, I recently found an insanely good novel. It's called Blue Spring Ride, from a Minamijo publisher. If you're in a reading slump or like youth romance, go check it out right now. If it's not good, you can come punch me through the screen. At first, these were just simple fan recommendation posts. Readers outside Minamijo mostly assumed they were just paid online promoters hired by a regional publisher to hype a new release, and did not take them seriously. But as the number of replies under these posts kept increasing, and people saw hundreds of comments that were almost unanimously praising the novel, curiosity inevitably began to stir. Even so, very few people were willing to immediately trust these voices and go buy Blue Spring Ride right away. The problem was that once someone saw several such posts within a single day, their mindset began to change. Really? Is it actually that good? That many people praising it like this feels excessive. I refuse to believe it's really as good as they say. Once human curiosity was triggered, it was hard to suppress. Crimson Maple's support for the release of Blue Spring Ride's standalone volume was limited. But in reality, as long as a work was good enough, readers would spontaneously organize themselves to promote it, acting as unpaid advertisers and spending large amounts of time recommending it to newcomers. Of course, this kind of grassroots promotion alone could never create anything truly absurd. For example, it was impossible for fan-driven promotion alone to suddenly let a novel stomp on industry giants like Clearstream Library or Starfield Publishing. Those companies had spent decades and countless fortunes building their distribution and marketing channels. The idea that they could be toppled so easily by word of mouth was pure fantasy. But for Blue Spring Ride, this spontaneous fan promotion was already more than enough to noticeably impact its performance. Within Minamijo, the novel was already quite popular and had decent name recognition. The real key was outside Minamijo, where it was basically barren land. Even if only a small fraction of readers in each region chose to believe the fans' recommendations out of curiosity, once you added together more than a dozen regions, the numbers became impossible to ignore. At the very least, it had already made Crimson Maple, which initially believed the first volume would sell only around 200,000 copies with first-week sales under 80,000, start to feel that something was off. Because by Tuesday morning alone, reports had already reached Crimson Maple from bookstores and distributors across the country stating that the initial shipment of Blue Spring Ride Standalones was close to selling out, and requesting immediate reprints. What's going on? It's only Tuesday. How can the initial 80,000 copies already be close to selling out? This is just a novel serialized in fleeting blossoms, isn't it? And it's not just Minamijo running short. Even outside the region, demand is the same. There are already new orders totaling tens of thousands of copies from other areas. Although the official sales data for Blue Spring Ride had not yet been released, many people inside Crimson Maple had already sensed that something was wrong. The company quickly notified the printing plant to work overtime to print more copies of Blue Spring Ride and rush them to their destinations. As the editor responsible for Blue Spring Ride, Yukino had been closely tracking related data all week. This feels wrong, she thought, finding herself unable to concentrate throughout the day, her attention constantly drifting back to Blue Spring Ride. Why are sales outside Minamijo so high? There was zero promotion in those regions. While the exact number of copies sold had not yet been officially counted, based on shipment volume alone, aside from the release day on Saturday, the total order demand from outside Minamijo after Sunday had already nearly matched, and in some cases even showed signs of surpassing, local demand within Minamijo. Chapter 42, A Contract Offer Before the Finale. The bulk of Blue Spring Ride's standalone sales was still, without question, centered in Minamijo. Even so, thanks to a handful of passionate fans fanning the flames behind the scenes, sales in other regions were also soaring far beyond Crimson Maple Literature's original forecast. Still, book sales were the kind of thing you could not truly measure until some time had passed and the numbers were properly tallied. Haruto was curious about how his work was doing, of course, but he was not so impatient that he would lose sleep over it. Instead, on Wednesday, at Yukino's invitation, he headed to her place again. He and Reina had already submitted all their final chapters the previous Friday. Contractually speaking, his and Reina's agreements with Crimson Maple Literature had come to a temporary close. April was closed now, and the weather was starting to turn warm in that unmistakable early summer way. Yukino wore a black pleated skirt today. The hem that used to brush her ankles last month now sat just a little above her knees. Her straight hair fell neatly to her shoulders, and she had on light makeup that made her look both beautiful and sharp, like someone who could be gentle and efficient in the same breath. After a bit of small talk, and once Reina arrived, Haruto got right to the point. "So why did you call us here this time? Is something up?" "Yeah," Yukino said, looking directly at him. "There are two things." She paused, then continued in a tone that was calm but clearly official. Considering how well your debut works have performed in the market, upper management at Crimson Maple wants to ask if the two of you would be interested in signing a long-term contract with us. The moment the question landed, the room went quiet. Normally, when Crimson Maple spotted a light novel author with real potential, they would extend a long-term offer. If you accepted, it meant that for the duration of the contract, any new work you wrote had to be submitted to Crimson Maple first. Only if Crimson Maple rejected the manuscript could you take that work and pitch it elsewhere. Naturally, there were benefits too. For long-term authors, the evaluation threshold at internal serialization meetings was lower. If multiple submissions were roughly equal in quality, Crimson Maple would prioritize the long-term author's work for serialization. They would also provide stronger support, higher manuscript fees, better promotion, more favorable layout and printing treatment, and a more noticeable tilt in resources than they would give to non-contracted writers. On top of that, the publisher would provide a base salary during the contract term, handle insurance contributions, and cover other related costs out of their own pocket. When Haruto and Reina first debuted, they were complete newcomers, so Crimson Maple had only signed them on single-title agreements. Now Crimson Maple had clearly realized what was happening. With the way Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight had performed, why would they not pull these two promising newcomers into their camp as soon as possible? Were they supposed to wait for the other major Minamijo publishers to swoop in and steal them away? Reina hesitated for a moment, then spoke first. As for me, I do not think I can agree to that right now. She looked sincere, not defiant. Writing novels should be free. I'm grateful for Crimson Maple's support, I really am, but Crimson Maple has a built-in limitation. Most of the works you publish and serialize are youth romance. Halfway through, she glanced nervously at Yukino, as if worried she had said too much. When she saw Yukino was not offended, she continued. If I keep writing youth romance in the future, then yes, I would definitely choose Crimson Maple again. But if my future work is mystery, hot-blooded action, deduction, or something else entirely, then a long-term contract becomes a shackle. It limits me. After listening, Yukino thought for a few seconds, then turned her gaze to Haruto. And you? Me? Haruto blinked. Honestly, he was conflicted. He and Yukino got along well. They had built a comfortable rhythm over the past couple of months. If someone extended a long-term offer like this and he rejected it, would that come across as cold or arrogant? Would Yukino think he was already planning to run off to another publisher? Would it sour what they had? 1,000 thoughts could flash through someone's head in a single second, but when it was time to speak, hesitation only made things uglier. In my case, I feel the same as Reina, Haruto said. What I'm good at writing is not limited to youth romance. A long-term contract would end up restricting my creativity. I see, Yukino said after a short pause. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. All right. In that case, I'll report it to the executives tomorrow just like that. That was it. Haruto and Reina both froze. Hey. Reina blurted out, almost immediately. You're just going to let it go. What else would I do? Yukino shot back, eyebrow raised. You made yourselves perfectly clear. I'm not an idiot, so why would I keep pestering you? I mean, I thought you'd give me some kind of lecture. Try to talk me into changing my mind or something. Reina's words were unusually bold, but Yukino really did not look upset at all. If it were other authors, I probably would, Yukino said with a soft laugh. That's my job. I'm supposed to use every method I can to achieve the outcome the company wants. Then her tone shifted, and it softened in a way that did not feel rehearsed. But you too, you couldn't come talk to me at the office on a weekday. So this is after hours. It's overtime, and there's no overtime pay. Obviously I'm not going to work as hard as I normally do. She tilted her head slightly, smile widening. More importantly, speaking not as your editor, but as your friend, I respect your choice. And I think your reasoning makes sense. Only mediocre people needed the safety net of a long-term contract to secure a guaranteed spot. But for true talent, those long-term contracts often became chains by the end of their careers. A trap that stopped them from going where they really should go. Reina might be fine either way, but Haruto. In Yukino's eyes, a long-term deal with Crimson Maple was a poor bargain for him, unless Blue Spring Ride was some kind of fluke and he turned into an ordinary writer the moment it ended. If that happened, at least he could collect the base salary and the insurance contributions Crimson Maple would pay over a 5-year term. That money added up to something meaningful, though it was not exactly life-changing. But was that realistic? Haruto was 16, and he had already produced Blue Spring Ride. What would he be capable of later? Would someone like him really be satisfied staying in Minamijo forever as a regional writer, never once considering spreading his name across the whole country? Yukino did not believe either of them would settle for that. If a national powerhouse publisher, one with the ability to market and distribute across all of Japan, offered them a long-term contract, that would be an opportunity they would have to seriously seize. Still, Yukino could not say any of that out loud. Professionally, it would be like eating Crimson Maple's food while smashing Crimson Maple's bowls. As a friend, though, she was genuinely happy that they were thinking long-term. And there was something else too, something she would never admit at work. Yukino came from a well-off family. Being an editor was something she did out of interest. She did not even know how much longer she would remain in Minamijo before being called back home. Her sense of belonging to Crimson Maple was not as absolute as it might be for someone whose entire livelihood depended on the job. If this position had been her only way to survive, she might not have been so casual about letting two promising stars remain so free. Speaking, as your friend. When Haruto and Reina heard those words, something quietly shifted in their chests. Because both of them were the type who did not really have friends at school or in daily life. They might talk to classmates fairly often, but that still fell short of what you would call friendship. And suddenly, a thought appeared, uninvited and sharp. Then what about her, and me? What are we, exactly? As if pulled by the same invisible thread, Haruto and Reina both glanced at each other at the same time. Their eyes met. And in the next instant, both of them looked away, pretending it had never happened. Chapter 43, Gifts, Celebrations and First Week Results. At that moment, the boy and the girl found themselves thinking about almost the same thing. The atmosphere turned subtly awkward. For a while now, Haruto and Reina had been meeting at Yukino's apartment twice every week like clockwork. Each time, after settling manuscript issues, they would sit down and game against each other until they lost all sense of time. Did that count as being friends? Or was it simply a relationship between rival writers? Or maybe, there was no relationship at all, and they were essentially just strangers who had met a few times? All right, what's with the sudden gloomy faces? You're making things awkward for me too, Yukino said quickly, stepping in to break the tension. Whether you sign the long-term contract or not, that's fine. Now let's move on to the second thing. It had been almost 2 years since Yukino graduated from university, and because of work, she often forgot what her student days had been like. But these past 2 months, working with Haruto and Reina, both still in high school, had frequently brought those memories back. Even though they had not known each other for long, this was exactly why her fondness toward them had grown so quickly. To her, they felt like junior schoolmates she was looking after. The second thing tonight is that we're celebrating the completion of Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight, Yukino said. As she spoke, she pulled a large poster out of her bag, spread it open, and temporarily taped it to the wall. When Haruto and Reina saw it, their expressions turned strange. It was clearly something Yukino had made herself using some rather clumsy photo editing skills, then printed at a copy shop. The poster displayed the serialization results, cover visuals, and a few congratulatory messages for both Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight. Honestly, both Haruto and Reina found this kind of celebration a little awkward. But awkward as it was, they still felt genuinely happy inside. What, you don't like it? Yukino shot them a look. Well, haha, I do like it, Haruto said. Me too, Reina added. So forced. Yukino sneered. She did not keep teasing them, though. Standing up, she ran into her bedroom, and about 30 seconds later came back out carrying 2 beautifully decorated gift boxes, handing one to each of them. What's this? Reina asked, looking confused. A gift, obviously, Yukino said smugly. I've been working closely with you two for a while as your editor. Now that the novels are finished, and since we get along pretty well, go on, open them. Reina hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won out. She opened the box. Inside was a brand new game console along with a game cartridge. The console you always play at my place is a limited collector's edition, so there's no way I'm giving that away, Yukino said. This is the regular version, plus a copy of True Iron Soul. The fact that they're still producing new units of this old thing just proves how many retro fans there are these days. Take it home, practice more, and hopefully next time I'll see you beating Haruto senseless in this game. Haruto immediately opened his own box. Inside was an anime figure. I remember you saying that he was your favorite childhood anime character, Yukino said, looking at the two of them with a smile. A friend of mine had one in her collection. I shamelessly begged her to ship it to me. She straightened up and spoke with clear sincerity. Congratulations on Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight reaching a successful conclusion. And I hope your future paths as light novel authors are smooth and steady. At that moment, both Haruto and Reina felt a kind of happiness they could not put into words. Yet despite that, they could not bring themselves to smile right away. They simply stared at the gifts Yukino had given them, remaining silent for a long time. Because for both of them, this was the first time in their lives that a friend had ever given them a gift. Time passed. Both Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight had entered their final stages, and the publisher had already informed readers in advance through the magazine. Yesterday's Starlight would publish its final chapter next Wednesday. Blue Spring Ride would publish its finale next Sunday. Normally, Fridays had always been the day Haruto and Reina went to Yukino's place to submit manuscripts. This routine had continued ever since the school term began. But now, for the first time since the start of the semester, both of them found themselves with nothing to do on a Friday night. No writing. No manuscript submission. No discussing plots with Yukino. No gaming duels at her place. The past 2 months of serialized light novel life felt like a dream. Instead of relief, both of them felt like something was missing. As if life had suddenly lost a bit of its flavor. Still, there was a clear countdown timer ticking in both their minds, constantly applying pressure. Yukino had already told them that by late May, Crimson Maple magazine would have 2 open serialization slots. If they wanted to compete for those slots, then the time they had left to prepare a new work was just a little over a month. Reina, aren't you going to piano lessons tonight like you usually do on Fridays? After knocking, Reina's mother entered her room and brought her a bowl of dumplings and syrup. I'm not going, Reina replied softly. I've been really focused on studying lately. My daughter is amazing, her mother said proudly. You're completely different from those underachievers who only read novels, watch anime, and play games all day. But even if you study well, you still need balance. If you're interested, I can sign you up for horseback riding. A lot of my friends have been posting pictures of their daughters riding lately. I think you'd be even better than them. No need, for now, Reina replied. After a few more casual words, her mother left the room, slightly disappointed. As soon as the door closed, Reina pulled out several books from her desk drawer and immersed herself in study. The Path of Writing. 3-Act Story Structure Techniques. Light Novel Writing Guide. The Life of an Author. They were all well-known writing guides from Japan and abroad. Up until now, her light novel writing had relied purely on talent. She had never systematically studied these things. But now she understood clearly that locking herself away and relying only on intuition was inefficient. Learning from the accumulated experience of great writers was the fastest way to grow. For the next month or so, she would devote herself entirely to studying writing. Only then could she surpass Haruto. Meanwhile, Haruto was at home sorting through his personal belongings. In just over a week, he would be moving out. The house he had lived in for 10 years was about to be seized and auctioned off. He felt a lingering sense of reluctance and melancholy. But there was nothing he could do. He was a law-abiding high school student. He would have to find a new place to live. Monday arrived. 1 full week had passed since the release of the Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight standalone volumes. Because there had been no work over the weekend, the sales data that should have been compiled on Saturday was only processed on Monday. Yukino arrived at the publishing house early in the morning, waiting for the first week sales results of both novels. At 9 o'clock, staff were still coordinating data with distributors. By around 10, the figures were finalized. The data was uploaded to the internal system, where any editor could access it. Aside from Yukino, many editors at Crimson Maple were also paying close attention to these numbers. After all, from magazine serialization alone, it was impossible to accurately judge popularity or fanbase size. Fleeting Blossoms carried over a dozen serialized novels. Out of its 300,000 sales, how many readers were actually fans of these 2 works? No one could say. Standalone sales were different. They were direct and unmistakable. That was why, in the light novel industry, standalone volume sales were effectively treated as a novel's true achievement and status. Yukino felt a little nervous. Even though she knew the results were ready, she hesitated for nearly a minute before opening the report. Meanwhile, voices were already rising in the open office area. No way. Is it really that high? I knew it. They ordered a reprint by Tuesday. Obviously Blue Spring Ride exceeded expectations, but I never imagined it would exceed them by this much. And yesterday's Starlight too. Even though it didn't sell as much as Blue Spring Ride, its late-stage quality jump was insane. The rating climbed to 8.9, second place in the magazine rankings, and third in votes. As expected, standalone sales don't lie. These two are both monsters. The editors began buzzing with excitement. Yukino finally stopped hesitating and opened the report. 2 lines of data appeared on the screen. Blue Spring Ride, Volume 1. First week total sales, 180,186 copies. Yesterday's Starlight, Volume 1. First week total sales, 65,982 copies. Chapter 44, Shock Sales and Industry Attention. 180,000 copies. When Yukino saw the number, she fell silent for a moment. She had known that Blue Spring Ride would sell well, but she had not expected it to reach this level. It was generally possible to estimate a standalone volume's total lifetime sales based on its first week numbers, with the gap usually being around 3 times. If Blue Spring Ride had sold 180,000 copies in its first week, then after circulating in the market for a while, the total sales of Volume 1 would very likely exceed 500,000 copies. And what did 500,000 copies for a single volume mean? That was a level only top-tier light novels in the Minamijo Prefecture could usually reach, and that was with major publishers putting in maximum effort, pouring in promotional budgets, pushing advertisements both online and offline, and mobilizing all available resources. As for Blue Spring Ride? To be honest, when compared to how the publisher treated its flagship light novels, the resources invested in Blue Spring Ride were not even 1/5 of that level. Yet it had still achieved these sales. It was absurd. If a light novel could maintain an average of 500,000 copies per volume, and if the author could continue writing 10 or even 20 volumes, then nationwide total sales would reach several million, or even tens of millions. An author with numbers like that would no longer be a small figure in the Japanese light novel industry. The only pity was that Blue Spring Ride ended in just 2 volumes. If Haruto had continued it for 10 or 20 volumes, allowing the serialization to run longer and accumulate more fans in Minamijo, this would have truly been a case of a single work launching him straight into the ranks of Minamijo's top light novel authors. By comparison, although Reina's Yesterday's Starlight seemed to lag behind Blue Spring Ride by over 100,000 copies in first week sales, the gap in reality was still significant. Even so, her results were already extremely strong. Close to 70,000 copies sold in the first week was an excellent performance in the Minamijo region. Many novels serialized in Crimson Maple magazine could not reach numbers like that. The reason it felt less noticeable was simply because Yesterday's Starlight had been completely overshadowed by the overwhelming discussion around Blue Spring Ride. People had overlooked the fact that Reina's novel, thanks to its rapid rise in popularity during the later stages, had also built up a large group of loyal fans. Yukino sighed inwardly. If Haruto had not existed, Reina would undoubtedly be Crimson Maple Literature's most eye-catching new female light novel author this year, without question the strongest rookie. Yukino continued examining the detailed data for both novels. For Yesterday's Starlight, almost all of its standalone sales came from the Minamijo Prefecture. Outside Minamijo, across the remaining prefectures, total sales were just a little over 2,000 copies. That was understandable. With zero promotion outside the region, and when placed next to famous, heavily marketed light novels with nationwide campaigns and sales events, it was only natural that most readers would not choose a book tucked away in the corner of a bookstore. What was truly abnormal was Blue Spring Ride. In Minamijo alone, Volume 1 had sold over 108,000 copies, which was already an impressive figure. But the remaining 80,000 copies had all been sold outside the region. Seeing this, Yukino began searching major light novel forums and publisher websites in other prefectures. Sure enough, with just a little searching, she could find posts on out-of-region forums where readers were spontaneously recommending Blue Spring Ride. Organic promotion. Fan-organized groups. Forum discussions where readers debated, praised, argued, compared, and passionately recommended the series to others. That was how Blue Spring Ride's out-of-region sales had been driven up. Similar cases had appeared before. Some excellent works from small publishers, with no marketing budget and no exposure, had initially been printed in just a few thousand copies. But once released, they received unanimous praise from readers, causing sales to surge dramatically within a reasonable range. For that to happen, the quality of the novel had to reach a certain threshold. Most readers were lazy by nature. Many would not even leave a single comment after finishing a book. To make them spend time actively recommending a novel, the work had to genuinely touch something deep inside them. If a novel was merely good in an ordinary sense, at best readers would just keep following it quietly. They would never bother going out of their way to promote it. Back at the office, many editors came over to congratulate Yukino. Congratulations, Yukino. These two newcomers are unbelievable. Is this Shiori Takahashi really a rookie? Could it be some veteran author using a pen name to pretend to be new? What a shame these novels are so short. They ended after just 13 or 14 chapters. If it were another author, they would squeeze every last bit of value out of them, writing 10 or 20 volumes before finishing. With this popularity, stretching it out would be like printing money. Exactly. By keeping them this short, they're losing millions for themselves, and the publisher is losing tens of millions. Yukino, even your bonus is affected. That's not a small amount. But that assumes they even have the ability to keep the quality up for 10 or 20 volumes. Don't confuse imagined profits with reality. Maybe they're writing purely for their dreams. If money didn't matter at all, why submit to a light novel publisher? They could just post it for free on forums. The editorial office buzzed with chatter. It had been many years since Crimson Maple Literature had seen newcomers with results this explosive, and many editors looked at Yukino with a mix of envy and jealousy. By the way, Yukino, someone suddenly said in a low voice, how long are these two signed with us? With their potential, if it's only a 3-year short-term contract for promising authors, that's not enough. We should renegotiate now, lock them into a longer contract while they still don't understand the market. Before Yukino could respond, another editor who knew the situation spoke up. 3-year contract? We don't even have a long-term contract with them. The agreement we signed was only for single works, not for the authors themselves. The office instantly went quiet. Everyone's expressions turned strange. No long-term contract? With these standalone sales figures. Among Minamijo's 5 major publishers, information flowed quickly. If these two were not tied to Crimson Maple, that was dangerous. Only Yukino remained calm. She smiled at her colleagues and said, all right, let's not focus too much on Shiori Takahashi and Eri. They're just two newcomers. I'll continue handling their follow-up coordination and do my best to ensure better cooperation with our publisher going forward. That evening, Haruto was on the subway home from school when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The moment he answered, a gentle female voice came through. Hello, is this author Shiori Takahashi? I'm an editor from. Haruto promptly hung up. That was the third call that day from editors at other publishers trying to poach him. He let out a long breath. He had enjoyed working with Crimson Maple Literature, and none of the publishers trying to recruit him had any clear advantage over them. He had no intention of leaving, and there was no reason to waste time on those calls. Still, this was the first time he had truly felt what it meant to be valued. When Haruto returned home, he saw the figure displayed on his shelf, the gift Yukino had given him. He did not feel a strong sense of belonging to Crimson Maple Literature. They published his work earned them money, and the cooperation itself was fair and equal. But during the process, the relationship had not been purely transactional. There were people involved, moments involved, and things that went beyond profit. At the very least, Haruto cared a little about how Yukino saw him. He did not want to be viewed as someone heartless who ran off the moment he became famous. Running away was not going to happen. And besides, he also needed to think about the new serialization opportunities in late May. Chapter 45, Fame Spreads and Plans for a New Work. In only a few days, the sales results of Blue Spring Ride and yesterday's Starlight spread throughout the entire light novel industry like wildfire. For a novel, the best calling card was always its standalone sales. Yesterday's Starlight moving over 60,000 copies in its first week was already an impressive debut. But Blue Spring Ride hitting 180,000 copies in its first week was not impressive. It was a detonation. Sure, about half of those sales came from outside Minamijo, but who cared? Money earned in Tokyo was still yen, and money earned in Hokkaido was still yen. The royalties were real either way. Within those few days, the name Shiori Takahashi started circulating through editorial departments and author circles at every major imprint. Everyone knew it now. At Minamijo Third High School, there was a rookie light novelist hiding in plain sight, and their skill was the real thing. Not long after, Crimson Maple Literature officially released the sales figures to the industry. Fans of both books celebrated like it was a festival, and a surprising number of students at Minamijo Third High got swept up too. Did you hear? A student from our school wrote a light novel and it blew up. I heard yesterday's Starlight is already past 80,000 total copies, and Blue Spring Ride is about to hit 250,000. That's insane. What class are these monsters even in? Do you think either of them could get a manga adaptation? Or even an anime? It's not impossible. It depends on investors. If an animation committee thinks it can make money, they'll buy the rights. Yesterday's Starlight might be a bit weaker, but Blue Spring Ride is absolutely in the zone. With those numbers, Volume 1 will easily clear 400,000 total, and it might even spike up to 500,000. With popularity like that, it meets the industry threshold for an anime adaptation. I seriously want to know which genius from our school wrote something like this. People always call Third High a cram school full of exam robots, but look at this. We can compete in grades, and we've got hidden monsters in other fields too. That week, you could hear conversations like that in almost every classroom. Both novels already had plenty of readers inside the school, and now that they had posted results like this, a new obsession swept through campus. Find out who Shiori Takahashi and Eri really were. For Haruto and Reina, it felt surreal. They sat there hearing classmates speculate about Shiori Takahashi and Eri as if they were urban legends. Reina thought, if they knew the high school girl genius author Shiori Takahashi they keep talking about is actually a quiet, easygoing guy who rarely smiles, would their brains just short-circuit? Haruto thought, if they knew the best-selling author Eri is actually Reina, the school's beautiful honor student, their eyes would fall out of their skulls. On Wednesday, Haruto used a real estate agent to find a new apartment complex in the southern part of the city. He hired movers, and the relocation went smoothly. The new place was only 10 minutes from school. The neighborhood was clean and quiet, the building was well maintained, and the unit itself was a 3-bedroom with high-end renovations. He was on the top floor. Every morning, sunlight poured in through the massive living room window, and when he looked out, he could see the whole skyline of Minamijo City, glittering and alive. The biggest advantage was obvious. No more subway crush every morning. The downside was also obvious. The rent was 90k yen a month. For most working adults, that kind of rent was painful. For a high school student, it was almost ridiculous. But Haruto had a few thousand yen saved up already, and more importantly, he had a very clear idea of what Blue Spring Ride would earn him. The magazine serialization ran for 14 issues. At the beginning, his manuscript fees had been only around 60,000 yen per issue, which was decent but nothing crazy. Then Blue Spring Ride climbed to the top of Fleeting Blossoms, and starting from issue 7, Haruto's fee jumped to 210,000 yen per installment. Even though the market had only serialized up to issue 13 so far, the total manuscript payment for the full run was easy to calculate. It would land somewhere around 2.4 million yen. And that was only the serialization fee. Right now, the total standalone sales for Blue Spring Ride had already surpassed 270,000 copies. Even if he simply assumed Volume 1 would reach 500,000 copies, and Volume 2 could maintain the same momentum, then the two volumes combined would exceed 1 million copies sold. At a 10% royalty rate, Haruto's earnings from standalone sales alone would exceed 10 million yen. And that still did not include the uncertain but potentially huge extra streams. Manga adaptation rights. Anime rights. Live-action film rights. When Haruto chatted with Yukino through email on his phone, she had casually mentioned that a few companies in Minamijo were already interested in negotiating for Blue Spring Ride's rights. Still, even ignoring those uncertain future deals, Haruto could confidently say one thing. Over the next few months, the income he would receive from Blue Spring Ride would exceed 15 million yen. With that kind of money, paying rent was nothing. He could practically buy the apartment outright if he wanted. Back in January, Haruto had been stressing about survival and schoolwork. Now, in early April, he already had a confirmed 7-figure income in yen. Life really could flip that fast. Being a light novelist is basically gambling. If you lose, your income is nearly zero, you sit at the bottom of society, and even your relatives look at you like you're a failure. But if your work hits... He stared up at the ceiling and let out a quiet laugh. Then being a light novelist becomes a job everyone envies. In Japan, when you succeed in creative work, people don't call you by name anymore. Light novelists, manga artists, anyone with real success, they get the same honorific. Sensei. In the end, this world is the same everywhere. Once you make money, you are successful. Haruto fell back onto his new, ridiculously soft bed and let his body sink into it. In 2 more days, Blue Spring Ride would finish serializing. After that train platform choice scene in Chapter 8, the later story was basically a steady, satisfying school romance between the leads. It was cute, it was warm, and it flowed smoothly. The popularity had held steady. It had not surged higher, but it definitely had not dropped either. As for the ending, it stayed open in the right way. The male and female leads liked each other, they became a couple, and the story ended with the clear feeling that they would walk toward a happy future together. If he wrote beyond that point, the messy late arcs from the original manga would start to show their face. It was not that the later manga was objectively terrible, but compared to the early part, it was like going from a 95 to a 70. If he reproduced that quality drop, readers would feel the difference immediately, and instead of praise, he would be rewarded with complaints, ridicule, and furious forum posts. No, this was better. Let Blue Spring Ride be born in praise, and let it end in praise. But once it ended, what came next? Haruto's eyes drifted shut. A strange heaviness pulled him down, and before he could even think about it properly, he slipped into sleep. In the dream, he once again became the girl named Shiori. She had just finished a match of League. Completely destroyed. Her scoreline flashed like a cruel joke. 0/16/1. The enemy Draven was 6 items at 20 minutes, and he stood at their fountain like a tyrant, deleting her teammates one by one. The only assist Shiori's Lee Sin got was when Draven got cocky and dove too deep. She threw a shield on a teammate and accidentally tagged the kill credit. After getting crushed in game, she endured 30 straight minutes of flame from her 4 teammates. Her mood was beyond miserable. So, still sulking, Shiori opened the familiar anime streaming site and followed a friend's recommendation. If you had been bullied by both the enemy team and your own team, then obviously you needed something warm and healing to patch your heart back together. Her friend had strongly recommended one title. This one will save you. It's gentle, it's emotional, and it's perfect when you feel like crap. That was the exact phrasing. The title was long. But it had a short nickname everybody used. Anohana. Anohana, the flower we saw that day. The moment Haruto saw that title, his spirit snapped awake. He had been waiting 2 whole months for this. Finally. The girl was watching something new. Gaming was poison. Shiori always had another match to play, another convention to attend, another endless feed to scroll. Getting her to watch anime again felt like waiting for a rare comet. Before she started, Shiori did what she always did. She checked the basic info first, careful to avoid spoilers. On that parallel world site, this series had everything. Views. Rating. Buzz. Discussion volume. Across the board, it outperformed Blue Spring Ride. Looks fine, Shiori murmured, her mood lifting slightly. So many people rated it highly, it should be pretty heartwarming. Haruto nodded in satisfaction. In the light novel market, stories like this were exactly what people loved. If it was truly as good as its popularity suggested, then pitching something like it to Crimson Maple magazine should not be a problem at all. Haruto held his breath. He steadied himself, then leaned deeper into the memory fragments, preparing to absorb every bit of the story's charm.
Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200+ audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.